Vinland Saga is the most important story I have ever experienced in the last few years of my life. It's changed me for the better. And I want to share that message with you and the world so you too can feel that change. If you haven't seen or read Vinland Saga, I recommend you experience it for yourself before I spoil some of the events in this video. With that said, this is still a great place to start your journey. Let's begin by explaining the story's major events in Season 1. A man named Thors, the strongest warrior, is on a raid. He decides he's had enough of war. He fakes his death and flees to Iceland. He begins a life of peace there and starts a family. He has 2 children, Yalva the elder daughter and Thorfinn the youngest son. Thorfinn is the main protagonist of Vinland Saga, and in Chapter 7 we get our first piece of what this story is about. Thorfinn is going through some of his dad's things and is stopped by his dad, Thors. He says, "Do you want a sword, Thorfinn? The sword is a tool meant to kill others. Who are you gonna kill with this?" He says, "Enemies." "Who is your enemy?" He says, "Halfdan." Thors says, "Listen to me, Thorfinn. You have no enemies. No one in this world is your enemy. There is no one you need to hurt." This is the core message of Vinland Saga, and as we go and explore this video, we'll start to understand more about this scene. Thors has to leave Iceland to placate Floki, the leader of the Jom's Vikings, and Thor's previous group of warriors. But things don't go as planned. Not only is Thors ambushed by Askeladd and his gang of mercenaries, his son also snuck on board and is in grave danger. Thors is single-handedly destroying Askeladd's men by not even using lethal moves. He's just using his arms, his fists. He's not even taking them out or killing them. And eventually he destroys half his men, and he says that he wants to duel in order to just end this as peacefully as possible, just a one-on-one match. And he does win, even though Askeladd uses many underhanded tactics to try to get the lead in the fight. Regardless, Thors still wins, and Askeladd is not accepting it. He says, "You have to kill me in order to end this fight." And he doesn't want to do it. Thors does not want to kill Askeladd or anyone. He says a true warrior needs no blade. One of his men takes Thorfinn as a hostage, and then we have this standoff. And Thors decides to just throw away his sword. Very iconic panel. He accepts that as long as he leaves Thorfinn and his men alone, he will sacrifice himself in order to end this conflict. And so he's shot down. Thorfinn is freaking out, and he goes over to his father. A very iconic panel as he's covered in arrows. And now Thorfinn is forever changed. He's set on a path of vengeance against Askeladd. He wants revenge, and he seeks that revenge by following Askeladd and eventually learning and joining from him and his group. And this is where Season 1 really begins. Thorfinn with only one goal of his mind, avenging his father. He survives, he kills, he murders, he rampages, and becomes one of Askeladd's greatest prizes of his group. Askeladd manipulates Thorfinn to doing exactly what he wants, and hopes for a duel. Askeladd never kills Thorfinn. He wants to keep him around because he's useful. Thorfinn is young, he can fit into things that others can't, he can infiltrate, he is strong and dangerous. The perfect tool for Askeladd. In every duel, Thorfinn loses even though he's strong enough to kill Askeladd. He loses because Askeladd controls Thorfinn through his emotions. Now Askeladd is undoubtedly a terrible person, but even he has his morals and principles. He has a plan and goals in mind. He isn't the greatest father figure of Thorfinn, but he becomes that. Thorfinn Season 1 is a reflection of Askeladd, but Thorfinn Season 2 is a reflection of his father, Thors. Askeladd is from Wales, a potential target between the war of England and the Danish Vikings. Skipping a lot of Season 1 here, but Thorfinn and Askeladd end up in the King's Assembly. The Danish king is a terrible man. Worse than even Askeladd. He's ready to wage war against anyone and anything, including Wales. Out of calculation and understanding this, Askeladd beheads the king, and the ensuing outrage changes the direction of the story. Askeladd is killed, Thorfinn curses the day, and in his anger over not being the person to kill Askeladd, he lashes out and cuts the current prince, the new king, Canute. Canute is an important figure in Vinland Saga, he's just not the focus of today's video. Thorfinn and Askeladd did a lot for Canute in saving him and changing his arc in order to become a true prince. Canute owes a lot to Thorfinn and Askeladd, but he is still a prince. His life was attempted upon. He spares Thorfinn by sentencing him to be a slave. Thorfinn doesn't care. He's lost all his motivation in life, and all his killing and rampaging has all been for naught. He couldn't even kill Askeladd, the man who murdered his father. And this is where Season 2 begins. There are a lot of big takeaways from Vinland Saga. We have to understand where Thorfinn came from to see how he changes and becomes the person he is in Season 2. Throughout Season 2, Thorfinn is a slave for 4 years. In this time, he is a hopeless void of emotion and drive. He has nightmares every night of the people he's killed. His existence is absolute pain. Thorfinn is partnered by Einar, a man from England. One day he learns of Thorfinn's past as a ruthless child warrior. He's initially very upset by this, but comes around to support Thorfinn and understands him as a man who wants to change. Einar is a great friend who doesn't turn his back on his friends. Their owner, Kettle, have a deal with all the slaves. When they plow and plant an entire field of wheat, they will be set free. The only issue is, they have to make this field by clearing hundreds of trees, which requires a horse to pull stumps from the ground, a horse which Einar and Thorfinn have little access to. Luckily for them, the old man Sverkel, the father of the slave master Kettle, has a lot of sympathy for our heroes, and helps him out again and again, including lending him his horse. Years later, Thorfinn and Einar finally planted their first set of wheat, only for some of the workers on the farm to destroy all their crops and set them back weeks, if not months of work. Einar and Thorfinn are rightfully pissed, and in defense of the situation and Einar's ensuing rampage, Thorfinn ends up punching one of the workers. This becomes a very dramatic moment in which Thorfinn realizes the violence that he caused. And he says, "I will never harm another person again. As of today, I am through with violence." The idea of violence being unnecessary is a key concept in Vinland Saga, and something Thorfinn is adopting throughout his character arc. I personally really resonate with both versions of Thorfinn. In fact, Thorfinn's arc is something any guy can learn a lot from, whether you've seen war or not. Many guys know what I mean. We're just more aggressive than girls by nature and purpose. The thing is, aggression is not always necessary. In fact, most of the time it isn't necessary at all. My personal story with this is real. I was an infantryman in the US Army for 3 years and 17 weeks. We were trained to be violent and efficient, deadly warriors, to close with and destroy the enemy. We weren't outright ruthless. There's rules of engagement that dictate our allowed aggressiveness. But needless to say, when it's time to act, we will act. How we soldiers behave during war and when we are at home is based on 3 different things: our training, military culture, and our experiences in and out of the battlefield. Our training is hyper-realistic and meant to simulate real combat. I've done dozens of training exercises just in those 3 years. Sometimes people get hurt. Sometimes massive risks are taken. Things like injuries, accidental gunshot wounds, hypothermia, or heat strokes. These are just a few examples. Army and military culture are really their own video, but to go into it shortly, let me explain this. We are mostly men, and we are taught not to show emotion, not to act out, speak out, and to follow orders. The lower you are on the totem pole, the more this applies to you. Leadership will make or break your experience, and change your values as a soldier. I've had countless bad leaders, and that weighs on you in time. Certain people should not be in charge of combat soldiers. Now let's take that same soldier and put him into combat. Life-threatening situations, day by day, for typically 9 months. Any man or woman who deploys to a combat environment deserves respect. regardless of what they did or when they were there. Being out there for months on end in a dangerous foreign environment is enough. It is a sacrifice to be away from your family and home, and to be put in levels of danger every day. I don't want to make this video about my deployment in Afghanistan, however, I will share one quick story. I was on a dismounted patrol with my platoon, heading back from looking for potential cache of explosive equipment meant to fire at our base, trying to keep the military jargon to a minimum. We passed a small shelter with many tents and people there living outside. There are a few stray dogs roaming around. I am placed on the front right side of the formation, essentially the first line of action towards anything in that area. A dog comes closer and closer to us, a normal sized stray dog, I'm not sure of the breed. We're yelling at it, throwing rocks, trying to push him away. It just isn't working. The dog keeps approaching and gets especially close to me. Now at this point, I'm hearing yelling from my squad leader to deal with the situation, get the dog away, but to be honest, I was not worried. I could tell the dog meant no harm. I grew up with many different dogs in my life. I have a lot of experience. I understand when a dog is just fucking around and when it means business. The dog was curious and playful. I let it go. But the situation was escalating. I heard yelling from my platoon leader in the back. I thought he said, "Don't shoot the dog." And I didn't. And tried to peacefully get him out of there. The dog does end up leaving as we pass the camp and get to our patrol base. Later on in the debrief, I get pulled aside by all my leadership. They were upset with me for not shooting the dog. Earlier, my platoon leader actually said, "Shoot the dog," which I misheard. Now, from a strategic level, I understand their point. However, I believe very strongly that the dog meant no harm, and killing him would only escalate the situation. I had no intention of killing that dog unless it posed a real threat, and I told him that straight up. They were upset with me, and were already upset with me, and did not like me, because I am not a yes man. There is a lot to glean from this story. It's about more than the dog. I can't say 100% that I made the right decision, as is the case with many combat situations. The dog could have harmed someone. It is a judgment call, and it was mine to make. We were pushed to make split-second decisions that change the entire situation for you and everyone around you. This is a small insight into the modern warrior. Thorfinn is a fictional character, but his story is real. Historically, there were child soldiers. Many of them. I was older at 19, but I was still a child in combat. Now take that 9-month deployment and 3 years of service, and now I get out at 21 years old with 3 years of conditioning. How does one overcome that? Here is an actionable thing for anyone watching this video to understand, begin to improve, and live more peacefully with others and themselves. It's very simple. We are in situations where people are hostile verbally or threatening physical violence. Now, if it's real violence, of course, be prepared to defend yourself or remove yourself from the situation. However, most things these days are verbal or a feint of actual violence. So when people are rude, hateful, or hostile towards us, we must change our initial reaction. We must breathe and realize that this person is just like us, and probably going through something that's causing them to act this way. Instead of going to their level and making the situation worse, take a moment and speak to them. Ask them, why are they doing this? What's going on to make them act this way? Are you alright? Is there any way I can help you? De-escalate the situation and calm them down. You might even make a friend out of it. If nothing else, you will certainly make their day better. Anger is pretty unnecessary in most situations, and by extension, violence is even less necessary. Once you see this and understand it, you can also see that when you successfully de-escalate a situation, you're not only the bigger person in that moment, but you're also helping that other person grow. And that's what this is all about. Don't take it personally, and try to see things from other people's perspectives. We can all learn from this. We can all become better at this, and all of us would benefit from trying to do this. There's one final piece to the Vinland Saga message. Thorfinn, like us at times, is a person without purpose, drive, and a void of any positive emotion. A quote from him in Season 2, Not a single good thing has ever happened to me. We all feel that in our hearts. We're so depressed, anxious, or in our own lives that we can't ever come to the table for others, least of all ourselves. We are so empty, we feel like we have nothing going for us, that there's no point of anything at all. This is something Vinland Saga tackles very well. Not only is Thorfinn's character arc something to learn from when it comes to violence, it is also one in finding meaning in life, becoming a better person when you're at your absolute lowest points, especially when you're at your absolute lowest points. Thorfinn and Einar are working on fixing a roof, and Thorfinn can't get it right. I don't even know how to fix a roof. I'm a human with nothing inside, completely empty. I don't know, nor can I do anything outside of fighting. I have no desires. The old man, Speckle, hears this, takes Thorfinn and Einar out fishing. Couldn't get a single one, and despite his instruction, Thorfinn still can't get it. He takes a moment, and he talks to Thorfinn. He says, if something's empty, then that means you can fill it with anything. In fact, if you want to change yourself, it's much better to be empty. It's perfectly fine to start learning right now. One thing at a time. Thorfinn asks, can I really change? He says, keep working. Your hands have stopped moving. Being empty is not the wrong starting point. It's okay to start now, today. It is never too late to become the person you are meant to become in this world. I know how this feels. I know how you feel. It's hard to start somewhere, to climb yourself out of the hole of depression, anxiety, loss, pain. The battle to overcome our violent nature is no different than the battle within ourselves to become a new person. There are forces trying to keep you down in that hole, but only you can climb your way out. I defeated depression a year ago, yet I am still fighting my battles with anxiety and addictions, but I am ever changing, continuing down the path that leads me to the person I'm meant to become. Recently, I realized my purpose in life. I am a storyteller. My mission is to tell stories through various mediums and use them to inspire others. This is my true passion in life. What is your passion? Who are you going to become? Perhaps by now, you feel something stirring within you. What is that feeling? You are no longer empty, my friend. Welcome to the first step to getting out of that hole. Take my hand and walk with me. Let's change together. Keep working. Your hands have stopped moving.
小兵だがよく鍛えてあるようだな、トルフィン。だがなぜ殴り返さないのだ。ドロットを倒せば元この枝というお前の実力の証明になるだろうに。
なんだその質問は。和平交渉の相手をぶん殴ってりゃ世話ねえぜ。あんた方とは今日会ったばかりだ。お互いのことは何も知らねえ。何の恨みもねえ。なんで俺たちが殴り合わなきゃいけねえんだ。バカバカしい。いがみ合ってるのはクヌートとケティルじゃねえかよ。親玉二人でネファタフルでもやって白黒つけりゃいいだろうが、こんな大勢集まって血を流す必要は全くねえ。俺たちは今日会ったばかりだ。あんた方は俺の敵じゃない。俺に敵なんかいない。